All right, so a couple of days ago, we had some pretty wild developments take place at the Pelosi house, where apparently the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, this guy Paul, who we have talked about on this channel for his prolific abilities when it comes to insider trading, was apparently attacked by a man wielding a hammer who had broken into their house looking for Nancy Pelosi. Okay, so there's a lot that has been like flowing around this story, a lot of conspiracy theories, which we're going to touch on here in a second, some of which were even like promoted, at least temporarily, by Elon Musk, the current owner of Twitter, which I'm going to talk about in a different video. But there's been a lot of misinformation. There's been a lot of crazy information that has come out about this attack. So let's just start off here with some of the basic details in terms of what actually happened. So here from CNN, they say what we know about the attack on Paul Pelosi. They say the man who is alleged to have attacked Paul Pelosi, the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, could have federal charges filed against him by the U.S. attorney in San Francisco as soon as Monday. Two sources familiar with the matter tell CNN. They say the federal charges against David DePapi, or DePapi, I guess is how you pronounce that name, the guy who did this, age 42, are expected to include threatening or injuring the family member of a federal official and a charge pertaining to attempted kidnapping, according to a law enforcement official. Okay, so basically what looks like happened is you have this guy who, as we're going to get to here in a second, basically, it looks like he had a lot of issues surrounding mental health and drug abuse as well. And then also on top of that, fell into a bunch of different deranged right-wing QAnon conspiracy rabbit holes and ended up just deciding to go and do this. And so it looks like he probably broke into their house. There was some time where during this break-in, Paul Pelosi was able to like escape for a little bit, I guess, to the bathroom and put in sort of a covert call to 911 and then put his phone in his pocket. And the person who was on the other line of the 911 call, this dispatcher, figured out that something weird was going on, so they sent out a wellness check, and by the time the cops arrived, apparently they have body camera footage of the actual attack happening, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like if it ever comes out. But the police show up, and they basically see this guy confronting Paul Pelosi, and he takes the hammer, which I guess Paul Pelosi had in his hands at the time, and then like smacks him upside the head with it, and now Paul Pelosi is in the hospital, and this guy is in custody. So that's just like kind of the basics of this. But part of the reason why they say that he's potentially going to be charged with kidnapping is because, number one, apparently he was carrying zip ties and duct tape, and in addition to that, obviously, again, as they're going to point out here, he was looking for Nancy Pelosi. He kept saying, "Where is Nancy? Where is Nancy?" And it looks like if the police hadn't arrived when they did, or if this had just unfolded in a slightly different way, maybe he was going to try to like literally take Paul Pelosi hostage in an effort to get to Nancy Pelosi. So there's a lot of crazy shit going on in this story, but let's just go ahead and read about this zip tie portion. So they say that CNN reported on Sunday that DePapi had with him a bag that contained multiple zip ties, among other things, according to two sources who have been briefed on the incident. They say in addition to the zip ties, the suspect also had duct tape on him, according to a law enforcement source, and the hammer that was used to allegedly assault Pelosi was brought by DePapi, according to a law enforcement source and a senior congressional aide briefed on the assault. They say neither source knew of any other weapon that was found when DePapi was detained, and CNN has previously reported that this guy allegedly tried to tie up Pelosi, again in sort of like a hostage situation, which is absolutely fucking crazy. They say the police have said that DePapi entered the home through a back door, and it wasn't clear how he circumvented any security measures. So this is like part of what has kind of been feeding into like questions that people have had about this. There's a lot of like weird things about this attack, right? Obviously there have been some people who have taken these sort of like plot holes, I guess that you could say, and so some of the initial reporting that came out from the police that turned out later to not be accurate, and have just used that as an opportunity to go on some of the most like deranged far right conspiracies in regards to this attack. But at the same time, it's like there's kind of like some actual questions here, right? Like number one, you're talking about the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, her private residence, and granted, she wasn't there at the time. Obviously, she was in Washington, D.C., which means that they probably had a little bit less security at their home, and they didn't have the Secret Service or anything like that. But at the same time, it's like this is Nancy Pelosi's home, and if Paul Pelosi is there, and it's like this multi-million-dollar home in a very wealthy area of San Francisco, like why would you not have extra security or even like a functioning alarm system that could have called the police immediately when somebody broke into the home? It's like there's a lot of weird things that kind of went on around this. Now, I don't think that means that there was some grand conspiracy here, that it was like a false flag or it was like a setup or something like that. There have been some conspiracies, one of which was actually retweeted by Elon Musk, which we're going to get to here in a second, that like this guy somehow was connected to Paul Pelosi and they were like, gay lovers with each other or something like that. I don't think that actually has any credibility to it whatsoever, but there's been a lot of wild things that have been floating around around in terms of like, some of the initial plot holes that we got from this. Another weird thing was that initially the police had said, and there was some reporting that there was a third person at the house who let the police into the home when they actually got there for this wellness check that they called in. And then later it was reported that that actually wasn't true. So we're going to go through a couple of those tweets here in a second, but just keep in mind there's a lot of like chaotic takes going on surrounding what actually happened during this. But they say that CNN previously reported that DePappy confronted Pelosi and asked where his wife was, again shouting, "Where is Nancy? Where is Nancy?" The speaker was not at home at the time of the attack. They say Paul Pelosi was able to call 911 at the start of the attack, a law enforcement source and another source familiar with the matter previously said. And San Francisco police entered the home around 2:27 a.m. local time on Friday to find Pelosi struggling over a hammer with DePappy. According to the city's police chief, an officer saw him violently assault Pelosi with the hammer before they tackled him to the ground and arrested him. So maybe you had sort of like this situation where this guy was planning to like hold him hostage for a little bit, try to get leverage to get access to Nancy Pelosi, and then when the cops showed up, the guy kind of figured like, okay, it's now or never, and then decided that was his opportunity to actually try to, I guess, kill Paul Pelosi. So I mean, this shit is just absolutely fucking wild, just in terms of where we're at as a country right now, that like this type of shit is just escalating. And we have a lot more political attacks that have been happening over the last couple of years, so not exactly the best like prognosis for the future stability of this country, to say the least. But another detail that we actually just recently got access to was this one, which dropped from CBS News, kind of feeds into the same through line in terms of like what this guy's motivation may have been or what sort of ideological underpinnings he had. So they say here that the suspect in the Paul Pelosi attack had a list of targets, law enforcement sources say. So we don't know any specifics in terms of like what other names were on that list. Was he going to target, I don't know, like some other left-wing or Democratic politicians or something like that? We don't really know a lot of those details, but this clearly to me indicates that this was something that was like at least semi thought out and planned by this guy, and that he had some intentions to make some sort of a statement in doing this. But now I want to get to some of the conspiracy theories that have been floating around surrounding this. So here from Al Jazeera, they say Elon Musk tweets conspiracy theory about the Pelosi attack. So just like the situation surrounding him posting the link to this article that he did, which was just from a completely deranged QAnon website, the situation surrounding this was like kind of honestly hilarious, because you're talking about a guy, Elon Musk, who just took control over Twitter, and he's kind of sort of balancing this, and I'll get into more details of the Twitter takeover by Elon Musk in a different video, but he's basically trying to balance like his self-proclaimed free speech absolutist values while simultaneously not trying to piss off or terrify advertisers on the platform, so that they don't just all like flee and he loses out on even more money than he's already going to with this completely overvalued purchase of Twitter that he inevitably was sort of like forced into doing. So you're talking about a guy who is now like the face and the head guy at this Twitter platform, and he's literally using his own platform to tweet like some of the most deranged conspiracy theories that you could possibly imagine. With like what purpose? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what would make him decide to tweet this article, but they say that Elon Musk, Twitter's new owner, tweeted an article containing a conspiracy theory about the attack on United States House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband Paul before deleting the post hours later. They say that Musk's tweet on Sunday linked to an article making unsubstantiated claims about Paul Pelosi's personal life and the role that it may have played in last week's attack at the home that he shares with his wife in San Francisco. They said that Musk tweeted the article by the Santa Monica Observer, a website with a history of publishing misinformation, after Hillary Clinton posted an LA Times article about the suspected attacker, David DePappy, and criticized Republicans for spreading hate and deranged conspiracy theories. So a number of different things about this that are kind of funny. Okay, so first of all, he was responding directly to Hillary Clinton by linking this article from the Santa Monica Observer. Now, why is this fucking hilarious? Because the Santa Monica Observer is like so deranged that they've literally in the past claimed that Hillary Clinton is literally not even alive anymore, and that she was like replaced by a body double back in like 2015 or 2016, and that was who was actually running against Donald Trump. So you're tweeting an article from a source, and you're tweeting that article in response to Hillary Clinton directly, and you're tweeting it from a source that has published articles saying that Hillary Clinton is no longer alive. Like, you want to talk about like the credibility of some of the things that you would post online and trying to maintain some semblance of that credibility as you're taking over this massive new platform. It's like, my guy, you're literally a couple days into being the owner of Twitter and you're doing this shit. I mean, really? I mean, it's just kind of like completely ridiculous. Now, on the other point here, that Hillary Clinton was trying to make, saying that, Republicans are responsible for this attack because they have been spreading hate and deranged conspiracy theories. I think, to some extent, I'm kind of hesitant to just directly blame anybody when these types of attacks happen, because it's like, you never know what the fuck is going on through somebody's mind who decides to break into somebody's home and attack like an 80-year-old man with a hammer and smash him in the face, right? Clearly, this guy has a lot of other issues in his life going on. Again, it's been reported that he had like a history of drug abuse. He had a history of mental illnesses that weren't necessarily being treated well. So, obviously I think there's a multitude of different factors that go into this. So I think that it's kind of weird to directly blame Republicans necessarily for directly causing this. But at the same time, if somebody is going and doing this attack and they're also motivated, and we don't really know the direct motivations that this guy had. Obviously it was a political motivation to at least a large degree, but to some extent you can say that, if you're going on Fox News every night as Tucker Carlson does, or if you're some sort of a political commentator on the right, or you're a right-wing politician who is just constantly spreading deranged, wild conspiracy theories and feeding into a lot of this derangement, then you shouldn't be surprised when some deranged person decides to go and act on these conspiracies, right? If you were trying to convince people that the Democratic Party is a cabal of elitist child blood drinking pedophiles or something, then some tiny percentage of the American people are probably going to go and act on that. So I think it's it's kind of up in the air. You never really know to what exact degree somebody could be blamed for this type of an attack, but at the same time, again, it just shows where we're at as a country right now, that this type of shit is becoming increasingly normal. And not only that, but then you have so many right-wing figures in response to this attack that are, number one, spreading some pretty deranged conspiracy theories around this, and number two, sort of blaming Democrats, which we're going to get to here in a second, while simultaneously saying that this shouldn't be a politicized event. So it's just a complete clusterfuck in terms of where we're at right now. But they continue saying that in response to Clinton's tweet, Musk posted the article while adding that there was, quote, a tiny possibility that there might be more to this story than meets the eye. And again, this article was basically claiming that this guy David DePappy was actually in a lover's quarrel with Paul Pelosi, which I guess, maybe there's a 0.001% chance that has some truth to it. But you're talking about an article or a source here that is just claiming ridiculous QAnon conspiracy shit on a regular basis. So it's there's not exactly much credibility to these types of narratives, but he posts this and says there's a tiny possibility that there might be more to this story than meets the eye. Now, clearly, because he deleted this tweet, he doesn't really think that, that's a realistic possibility, and this is just him sort of feeding more of the right-wing base that is fervently in support of Elon Musk and so-called free speech or whatever. So, this was just honestly a hilarious example of how much of a disaster Elon Musk's ownership of Twitter is actually going to play out being, as he is having to do this balancing act between being a self-proclaimed free speech absolutist while simultaneously wanting to please the advertisers. It's those two things are kind of contradictory there, buddy. So I guess good luck. But again, according to the official reporting that we have on this, the San Francisco PD are saying, according to NBC News, that there were just two people, so there wasn't that third person, which is one of the main factors in terms of why people were feeding into those conspiracies. And on top of that, they say that Paul Pelosi and this attacker did not know each other previously. So, this is the information that we have right now. Doesn't seem like there's any real connection between Paul Pelosi and the attacker, and that, there's not really some grand conspiracy. In all likelihood, this was just some fucking crazy guy who, fell down a couple wrong rabbit holes on some conspiracies and just decided to go act this out. So that's basically my main takeaway from this. But again, we also had the conservative response to this, which was kind of funny because, if you just look at some of the general sentiments that are coming out of Fox News here. So this is basically a good summary in terms of what most of them have been saying. So this was from a commentator named DeAngelis, and she said, "We're waiting to find out what the motivation was, but there are two things that we could have on our hands here. A crime situation that just happened more randomly or with some motivation, but wasn't really targeted at the Pelosi's per se." Now, number one, okay, I granted this was sort of at the beginning that they were using this narrative. There's sort of at the beginning, we didn't have all of the details, but this guy was clearly politically motivated. We basically knew immediately that he was looking for Nancy Pelosi specifically. So this wasn't just some random break-in that was part of some grand crime wave that we've been seeing across the country or something like that. No, he very obviously had some political motivations. We don't know the exact details of why he specifically wanted to target the Pelosi's, but if you're posting a bunch of QAnon shit on your social media profiles and you're going and looking for Nancy Pelosi and you're bringing zip ties and a hammer and whatever, clearly there's a political motivation there. This wasn't just some random act of a robbery gone wrong or something like that, right? So that's just kind of ridiculous. But they say that that shines a light on what's happening not only in San Francisco but all these other cities. Again, so trying to portray it as if it's just a part of liberals being soft on crime and this massive crime wave that is essentially non-existent if you actually look at the data. But they continue with a second theory here, saying if we have a situation where this is politically motivated, it is. You have to step back and say, why is our country so divided? President Biden, you got up to the podium and said you were going to bring us together, and that was one of the things you promised people. It's one of the reasons they voted for you, and they backed away from Trump because they didn't think that he was divisive. So why is this happening, and why are we so polarized? It's a huge question right now. So, I mean, that is just honestly fucking hilarious that the response from conservatives and Fox News types and pundits seems to be like, number one, this wasn't really politically motivated, and this is just a part of this grand crime wave that we've been seeing, which has been driven by these radical, crazy, defund the police Democrats who literally do not exist in this country right now. There's like 2 politicians in the whole country that actually support defunding the police, and that never actually happened during the Black Lives Matter movement or anything like that. So that's the narrative number one, right? We don't know if this is politically motivated. You shouldn't be trying to politicize this event, even though it was clearly politically motivated. And then the backup to that is for them to just say, well, if this happened because of some political reasons, well, that's because Joe Biden and the Democrats are, so divisive with their rhetoric and stuff. And then you'll see those same conservatives who are saying that, Joe Biden, the guy who spent his entire fucking Senate career and as the president desperately trying to work with conservatives on any piece of legislation that they will work with him on, that guy is apparently like the most divisive person in the country, right? I mean, it's just fucking hilarious. And those same people who say that Biden is divisive, Democrats are divisive, will then turn around and go say that like Democrats support open border policies and that they're trying to force every kid in the country to become transgendered and that like, they support violent criminals and shit like that. It's like, you guys are way more divisive. I mean, obviously there's a lot of liberals who are pretty politically divisive and stuff and use a lot of charged language and all of that. But at the same time, you're just like not only politically divisive, but you also just like completely make up bullshit narratives surrounding what Democrats actually believe. You don't steel man their positions, you completely straw man their positions. And, that does in some sense feed into a lot of these deranged beliefs that millions and millions of conservatives have around this country, that like we're under attack by some like, communist coalition within the Democratic Party who's like attacking your children and, wants all of these criminal, murderous gang members from Mexico to come into the country and shit. It's like you're just actively, making people more deranged and rotting their brains on a regular basis. So to some extent, I mean, this guy obviously had his own issues personally, and maybe he was just a lone wolf who just happened to fall down the wrong rabbit holes and conspiracy theories, and he just decided to go do something crazy. But at the same time, I mean, you can't just say this has nothing to do with the right-wing conservative conspiracy theories that have been so normalized across this country that it's ridiculous. I mean, this is just an example of like how completely fucked politically we are as a country right now. And honestly, just seeing more and more of these types of political attacks happening, I'm not even sure if we can like sort of step back from this and cool off before it's too late for us as a country.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying